Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Fellowship Christian. We're thrilled that you made the decision to join us for one of our services. Now, here's a message from our lead pastor, Doug Dayton.
I'd like to welcome everybody to church. If this is your first time to be a part of one of our services, we consider you our honored guest. In the back of the bulletin that you received on your way in, you can find a connection card. If you did not receive a bulletin, then you can find one in the connection card in the back of the pew in front of you. I want to encourage you to fill that out, and immediately following the service, you can either take it to the cafe in the back, or you can take it to the connection booth in the foyer, where we have someone that would love to greet you, shake your hand, and give you a small gift as a special thank you for being a part of our service. I also want to welcome everybody that's tuning in via the live stream, with a special shout out to the chain breakers and those tuning in from the correctional facility. I want you to know that you're God's best, that God has a plan, a purpose, and a destiny for your life, and that He never looks at your past to determine your future. Amen? Amen. So sometimes I like to start things off with something a little bit funny here, and I was reading a story about Joe. Joe was someone that did not have the greatest communication skills. And whenever Joe would try to have meaningful conversations, sometimes he would beat around the bush. Sometimes he wouldn't speak in ways that connected with the person that he's talking to. So Joe meets Betty, and Betty is a perfect match for Joe. She's just someone that connects with him on so many different levels. As they spend time, as they're dating, as they're building this relationship, Joe realizes that this is a relationship that he could see himself in for the rest of his life. So he decides that it is time to pop the big question to Betty. So when Joe very first met Betty, it became very apparent very quickly. He fell head over heels in love with her. They just connected on such a deep level, even though he didn't have the greatest communication skills. So he thought about how he could possibly propose to her and what the right way to do this would be. So he kept the ring with him at all times. And as he walked around, he was looking for that perfect moment, and he could never seem to find it. Finally, one day they're walking through the mall, and they step into this pet shop. Betty she loves all the furry critters, and she's petting the puppies and playing with the hamsters and got a ball of yarn with the kittens. And she felt so warm and fuzzy that Joe realized this was his moment. So he went in for the kill, and he says, Betty. Betty says, yes, Joe? It's been really good being a bachelor, but there kind of sort of maybe comes a point whenever you're a bachelor when you realize that that period needs to come to an end, and everybody needs someone in their life that they need someone in their life that they can, what's the word that I'm looking for, that can make them feel like a hero. They need someone in their life that can be someone that they could claim as their own. They need someone in their life that they can love unconditionally, who will be caring and nurturing and true to them. And as Joe is saying all this, he looks at Betty, and Betty's eyes seem like they're receiving exactly what he's saying. She's nodding her head, and she says, yes, Joe, I understand, and I couldn't agree with you more. Let's go buy you one of these puppies. So the moral of the story is that when you have something to say, sometimes you don't need to beat around the bush. You need to state it clearly, and you need to say it straight. You need to say it in a way that the other person understands what you're communicating about. And that's one of the things that we're going to be talking about in today's message. So many times people try to express love to the people that they have in their life, and it just does not land. Whether it's a husband that thinks that by earning his paycheck and fixing the cars and fixing the dryer, that's how he's expressing love, and all his wife wants him to do is hold her hand, or whether it's the wife that wants her husband to go shopping with him for quality time. So many times people are expressing and communicating love in a manner that is not being received by the person that they're trying to express that love to. So back in the mid-90s, there was this book that came out, and it was called The 5 Love Languages. It shot up to the top of the charts. It was a New York Times bestseller, and it was received so well because so many people were reading this book trying to understand the way that they communicate and receive love is important. So around the 2000s, this kind of really got involved in the church communities, and there were churches that were doing congregation-wide love language tests to help people understand the way that they communicate and express and receive love. There were all of these people that were causing the folks that they're dating to take these exams just so they could know what they were expecting and what it would be that they could do to help communicate love in a meaningful way. So about, I guess around the 2000s, I ended up taking this just out of morbid curiosity. I wasn't even dating Jessica at the time that I took this, but I was thinking, well, that's interesting. The interesting thing about this information is once you know it, once you understand it, you can kind of see it in play in the lives of the people around you. Now, you can almost even identify what someone's love language is before they ever even take the test. Now, what I've realized is that without noticing, a lot of times the way that people are communicating love is the way that they actually want to receive love. So they might be communicating love on this level up here, but their spouse is trying to receive love down here or up here, and they just miss each other like ships in the night. So whenever you look at the Word of God, as I was preparing this message talking about the 5 love languages, just for the fun of it, I decided I was going to look at a couple of different people from the Word of God and just see if I could identify the way that they expressed and received love. And this isn't, a super doctrinally, this isn't a doctrinal statement. This was just me having fun looking at different love languages in the Bible. And I looked at the story of Mary and Martha. And for those of you that don't know, that was Lazarus' sister. Lazarus' sisters, these are Jesus' friends. They loved spending time with Jesus. So Martha is sitting here, and they have Jesus coming over for dinner at their house. And she is probably, I would say, a acts of service type person. She feels that by preparing this wonderful meal for Jesus, she is expressing love. So she wants to make everything marvelous for Jesus. Now, while Martha was doing that, Mary is literally sitting at the feet of Jesus, and she just wants to be in his presence. She just wants to spend quality time with Jesus. And now these are two different types of people that are expressing and receiving love. Now, as Mary would have probably been a quality time type person, she wanted to invest that time with Jesus. So what I realized, though, is that a lot of times the cultures that we are in, whether it's our community culture or even sometimes our family culture, those cultures shape the way that we express and we receive love. So when I look at that through the scope of Jewish tradition, I think a lot of times that Martha was showing love to Jesus in a very traditional manner, where Mary was showing love in a very non-traditional manner. Mary was showing love by simply wanting to sit at his feet when other people might have perceived her, if she really cared, to do something in the kitchen and to help out. But although that was meaningful to her in a non-traditional way, she was expressing love. And you could look at so many different people. I think about Gideon. Gideon was one of those guys. He was probably a words of affirmation kind of person, because God was always having to affirm him and let him know that he was doing exactly what he wanted him to do. Now, you could go on for days and days, and you could peel all the different layers off of the onion and look at this from a lot of different things. But as I was looking at this, I had an epiphany. I realized Jesus, during his time on this earth, he loved people in all 5 love languages. And that's really an interesting thing to observe, because Jesus showed quality time, because he shared meals with people. And it wasn't just the people that he loved and that he felt great about hanging out with. He hung out with the social outcasts. He hung out with the people that had messy issues in their life. But he spent quality time with them regardless of their position. He showed acts of service. He washed the feet of his disciples. He showed love through physical touch, even touching a leper. which was unheard of, uncalled for. But he loved the lepers, touched them, and then he showed words of affirmation by stating his love for people. He said, as the Father has loved me, so I have loved you, so remain in my love. And that's John 15:9. He loved in every love language imaginable, and he continues to love each and every one of us in an unimaginable and powerful way till this very day. Now, sometimes we think that the only way that we can express and show love to God is through maybe worship. Maybe the way that we express and show love is through spending time in prayer. Let's break down some boundaries real quick of what's defined as worship and showing love. Let's not limit ourselves to those boundaries. Let's allow the Holy Spirit to show us how we truly can speak any love language to God. If you want to, let's say that we're in worship. If you feel moved by the Spirit and you wanted to sway a little bit, that's okay. If you're sitting there in worship and you feel an expression of love, if you wanted to lift your hands as an act of surrender and cry out to God, that's okay. If you wanted to get on your knees, that is okay. Whatever you decide to do, whenever you allow the Lord to nudge you, to lead you, whenever you do anything to express love to God, He loves it. He looks not as a man sees. He looks to the heart. He sees the attitudes and the intentions of our heart. So any way that you describe that you desire and want to express love to God is beautiful in His sight. Maybe you're expressing love is reaching out to that person that hasn't been to church in decades. Maybe it's taking a meal to a neighbor. Maybe it's being kind to a person who has been rude to you. But by simply allowing the Lord to use you, by allowing yourself to expand and be used by God, by willing to love people when it's not convenient, you're allowing God to use you in a powerful way. So, don't let anybody tell you that it's not beautiful regardless of what it is. So the first love language that we're going to talk about today is words of affirmation. And I'm probably going to spend the most time on this first one because this is where people genuinely seem to need the most help. So words of affirmation. What are words of affirmation? They are verbal compliments. They're words of appreciation. They're powerful communicators of love, but they're best expressed in straightforward statements to the people that we're doing life with. Now, the object of love is not getting something from someone, but it's doing something for the well-being of the person that you love. So what does that mean? That means that sometimes when we receive affirming words, we will sometimes be more motivated to give affirming words. Whenever I find families that are in this downward spiral of communicating to each other in negative ways and yelling at each other and not saying positive things to each other, that's one of the first things I say. Someone has to take that first step. Someone has to be the one to speak life when everybody around them is speaking negativity. And I think that so many times that when someone is that beacon of light in the midst of a difficult situation, God smiles down on them. He gives them an extra measure of grace to be the one that has the strength and the fortitude to turn the ship. When we receive affirming words, we're a lot more likely to give them. The Bible puts it this way in 1 Thessalonians 5:11. It says, therefore, encouraging one another, build each other up, just as in fact you are doing. That tells you that words of affirmation are biblical. Encouraging words means to inspire courage. Now, all of us have areas in which we feel insecure. All of us have areas where maybe we lack courage at some time. But whenever you lack courage, it can hinder you from accomplishing the positive things that God wants you to accomplish in your life. For those of you that are in engaged, or if you're in a marriage relationship, there are a lot of times that you have this wonderful opportunity to inspire your partner. If there's an area that they're insecure, if there is something that they're really struggling with, sometimes encouragement requires empathy. It requires having a person that will see something from your perspective and help encourage you to move your life in the direction that you want to go. Now, in order to do that, you got to first learn what is important to your partner. Only then can you give encouragement. Whenever I first started dating Jessica, it became very apparent really quickly that words of encouragement were important to her. So I came from a household where we did not necessarily, if someone called you a moron, that was a word of encouragement from them. That was just the way that our family was structured. So I had to become intentional about speaking words of encouragement, speaking life over Jessica. It's important to learn what is important to our partner. Sometimes, though, it's kind words. If we communicate verbally, we have to use kind words. Sometimes, we talked a little bit about this last week, sometimes we might be communicating kind words in an unkind manner. We might be saying, "That's a wonderful meal that you prepared, dear." But, "Gee, that's a wonderful meal you prepared." I mean, depending upon how you share the words, your body language, the way that you share those words sometimes can change the outcome. It can determine whether or not they're spoken kindly or if they're spoken harshly. Maybe the word that you need, maybe the word of affirmation you need is a word of forgiveness. 1 Corinthians 13 gives us a great roadmap. It says that love does not keep a record of wrongs. Love doesn't bring up all of the past things that a person has done wrong to you. Sometimes you need to speak those words of forgiveness. No one is perfect. No one is going to hit the mark every single time. We're all going to blow it at some point or another. We cannot erase the past. We can only confess the past and hope to move forward. We can ask for forgiveness. We can try to act differently in the future. But if you've wronged your partner, sometimes you need to just simply ask them for forgiveness. If your partner has wronged you, sometimes you need to extend forgiveness. If someone has confessed and they've asked you for forgiveness, then you have a choice. You can decide whether you want to operate and extend justice, or you can choose whether you want to extend forgiveness. Now, if you're the one that is always wanting to see the penalty and everything that a person deserves, you're probably not going to experience intimacy the way that God wants for you to. But if you cover the wrong, if you look at your spouse without being polluted by all of the past mistakes that they've made, if you can move forward, if you can extend forgiveness whenever everything inside of you wants to extend justice, you will find that your marriage relationship is getting better. Now, there are a lot of things that we're sharing that, although this book, the 5 love languages that we're talking about, express them in a marriage relationship, there are a lot of things that are applicable to your children, to your friendships, to your coworkers. In fact, the guy that wrote this book, he branded it every possible way. It was like the 5 love languages, the 5 love languages of teenagers, the 5 love languages of children, the 5 love languages of pets, the 5 love languages of coworkers. So the principles can be taken and applied in a lot of different ways. But sometimes the way that people, it's important for us whenever we are using words of affirmation to sometimes communicate those words in a humble way. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. If you have a desire or a need inside of your relationship that you want, you can express those desires, but you want to make sure that they don't come across as demands. Because if you do, take it to the bank. If you're demanding in your relationship, you will never get as far as you can as you would if you were asking. If we make our needs known as requests, though, there are a lot of times that the conversations that we have in the scope of that will give us guidance in how to move our relationship in the direction that we want it to go. I'm one of those people that does not like ultimatums in life. One of the places that I used to work at, if a coworker came up and gave anyone an ultimatum, they would instantly be fired on the spot. Maybe that was what skewed my perspective of ultimatums early on in my life. But if anyone gives an ultimatum, ultimatums do not typically end the way that either party wants for them to end. So rather than giving ultimatums, "I want you to do this or else," maybe you should change it from "or else" to "I would love if we could work on this." And when we turn those ultimatums into requests, we'll move our relationship in the direction that we want it to go. So let me give you some tips on this. Give indirect words of affirmation. This is good. If you're trying to make your relationship blossom and grow, give indirect words of affirmation. And that's not specific to the marriage relationship. Let's say you got a coworker that's doing a great job. They've always got your back. Maybe you should spend some time building them up to your boss, or talking good about them. Rather than sowing seeds of negativity, spend some time building them up and affirming them. I say it all the time that Jessica is one of my favorite preachers. Jessica is an amazing mom. I brag about Jessica to other people because I want those words of affirmation to get back to her. Whenever one of our team members here at the church is doing a great job, I always love to let people know that they're doing a great job, because sometimes people just, they always fly under the radar and they think that everybody knows the things that they're doing. And they've got all of these amazing things that they're doing, but nobody knows about them because they're not tooting their own horn. Sometimes it's great for you to give words of affirmation to toot other people's horns. So, here's a challenge for you. If this is something that you're facing in your life, if there's not a whole lot of affirmation going on, here's an experiment that I want you to conduct. Start sharing words of affirmation indirectly about that relationship, whether it's with your kids, with your spouse. Brag on your kids. Talk good about other people. Lord knows, don't talk bad about them. That's moving in the opposite direction. Second love language we're going to talk about today is quality time. Now, togetherness, simple togetherness, is one of those things that a lot of times people are looking for in their relationships, whether it's with your children or with your spouse. Sometimes that intentionally spending time with that other person is going to help your relationship to blossom and to grow. Now I'm not saying sit there while you're on your phone and have a half of a conversation. I love it when people put their phones down and actually look people in the eye and have a conversation with them. Now, I heard a couple of amens in the back on that one. But sometimes disengaging from everything else to spend quality time with your kids, your friends, your spouse, disengaging and spending that time with that one person is the most meaningful thing that you could possibly do. I know that usually when I give this point, I'll kind of throw it out there. That doesn't mean sitting on the couch watching TV together, but actually one of the ways that Jessica likes to spend quality time is me sitting on the couch with her holding her feet while she watches the show. And that, sometimes people giggle about the holding the feet thing. That is meaningful to her, simply watching a show, not doing 15 other things, but it's usually something that I don't particularly care to watch, but it's meaningful to her, so I'll take one for the team. Sometimes you got to take one for the team, guys. You might not want to be the walking clothes rack in the store while your spouse is shopping, but sometimes you got to take one for the team and just hold all the clothes and allow your spouse to realize that you are there because you are expressing love to them. So quality conversations, dialogue that is meaningful, where you talk about your thoughts, your feelings. Now, I come from a family, we do not talk about our feelings, especially to your spouse. They might talk about a lot of other things, but just feelings, well, we were not a very touchy feeling-oriented family. So I had to allow the Lord to work on me on this one, to talk about the way I feel. And I would say, that makes me feel, and then I would instantly want to not carry on the conversation any further. We did not talk about our family, but I realized in order for my relationship with my spouse to blossom the way that it should, sometimes you got to talk about the way you feel. And so what does that mean? How can you maintain quality time? How can you, when you are engaged with someone, how can you make the most of that experience? First of all, I know I joked about putting the phone down. Maintain eye contact with that person that you're talking to. Let them know that when you're talking to them, you are talking to them. You're not talking because they're talking to you. You're engaged in a conversation with them. Don't listen to them and do something else. This is super important. For those of you that have little kids, whenever your kids are trying to get your attention and show you something, we have to be intentional about not blowing our kids off, but engaging each one of our kids on an individual basis. And I'm so thankful for Jessica, because if I ever start to get off the mark on that one, she reminds me, hey, they would really like for you to engage with them on that. And sometimes I take a moment and I focus on what's going on with the kiddo. I hear what they have to say. Sometimes I speak the things back to them, but I'm very intentional about spending that quality time with each one of the kids individually. And I know that some of the folks in our church have like 6 kids living at their house. I know that that is a full-time job, expressing quality time with each one of the individual kids. But whenever you're spending quality time with someone, observe their body language. That is like the biggest key. If you're sitting there and you do or say something and the person you're sitting with goes, here's a pointer. You probably said or did something that shut that conversation down. Now, the thing that gentlemen tend to do that ladies do not necessarily do quite as much is if they say and do something that causes one of these, they think, well, I don't care. If you're not going to talk, I'll just go do something else. And they act like it's not a big deal, and they ignore the situation, and then suddenly a fire develops in their relationship. So sometimes we have to take a step back and learn how to talk to somebody. We need to maximize our quality time. Self-revelation does not come easy for a lot of people. Awareness and expression of emotion, whether we're glad, we're mad, we're sad, we're afraid, it's essential to build healthy relationships. Emotions are neither good or bad. Emotions are emotions. They are simply a demonstration of the psychological responses to the events in our lives. But if we ignore the expressions in our life, then we are ignoring self-expression. So last week when we talked a little bit about communicating to people with different personality types, I wanted to answer a question: how can we communicate? How we communicate is often, it has a great deal to do with our personality types. And I know that we talked last week about focusing on the person that you're communicating's personality type. Sometimes you have to focus on your personality type, the way that you are communicating in that situation, and change that. Rather than trying to focus on changing the way that the person is hearing, we need to focus on communicating the way that they will receive us. So, men and women tend to have a couple of basic differences in the ways that they communicate and how they problem solve. When you become aware of your own types, your own expressions, and you become aware of your partner's types and their expressions, that will shape your communication strategy. Communication will be the expressway to maximizing your quality time. So it might be spending quality activities. And this is something that is different for each couple, for each kid. You got to find that thing that is meaningful. Like I was joking about being a human clothing rack at the grocery store. Sometimes that is meaningful for you to spend time with your wife shopping. And even if everything that she has tried on looks the exact same, give an opinion. If she truly wants it, and if not, then just say, yes, dear, yes, dear. But maybe that means that you try fishing with your husband. Maybe that means that, I know that some of the younger couples that we have, they game together. That's great. Whatever floats your boat, you're intentionally spending time with the person that you love in a way that's meaningful to them. For us, we enjoyed doing karate as a family. And, we weren't very good at it when we first started. And there were some times that we were sore and some times that we probably did not enjoy it as much as we could. But that was something that we ended up spending a lot of time together doing. We would go fight in tournaments together. A family that fights together stays together. So that was something that was a quality activity. So what would designate something a quality activity? At least one person wants to do it. The other person is willing to do it, and both of you know why you're doing it. You're doing it to spend time with each other, whether it's walking through a park, whether it's watching a show or going to a movie or just simply going out to dinner. You're spending that quality time. Does that mean that you're going to have to prepare and plan? Sometimes. Does that mean that sometimes you're going to have to give up on something that you individually want to do? Yeah, sometimes. One of the things that blows my mind is whenever a couple, they take their relationship to the next level, they get married, and then the husband wants to spend alone time. The wife wants to spend alone time or time with their friends rather than time with each other. And they spend this entire relationship to move forward to the marriage point, and then once they get married, they want to spend all this time away from the person that they married. That's not usually a successful way to move your relationship forward. If you're trying to escape the person that you married, then sometimes you have to take a step back and realize maybe we need to do some things together rather than apart. So one of the life hacks that I could throw you out there is sometimes set some daily minimum requirements. If you have family together as a family, maybe you spend some time and have each person share just a couple things that happened in their day, how that made them feel, but be intentional about engaging in quality conversation. Third love language we're going to talk about today is giving gifts. Gift giving is a universal part of the love relationship. Baby, I love you, and you give flowers. Or whenever you are about to get married, you give a ring. The gift giving part of the relationship is one of the oldest ways that people express love. So the giving of a gift is symbolizing the thought that you put into that gift. Meaning, guys, if you're going to give your wife a gift, don't just pick something up at 7-Eleven on the way home. I got you a box of Skittles. I joke about that. That would be meaningful to Jessica. She'd be like, oh, you got me sour Skittles. I love you so much. But expressing and actually securing a gift, showing that you spent some time thinking about that gift, is an amazing expression of love. But sometimes that means giving the gift of self. If you're a busy person, sometimes that means making yourself available, giving that gift of quality time. Now, I'm not saying that you should be like, hey, I'm here. That is my gift. Me, I am here with you. Because that might not pan out the way that you'd like for it to. So let me give you some tips on that one. Make a list of all of the gifts that you know that your partner or your spouse or your children or your grandparents, make a list of the gifts that they have received that seemed meaningful to them. Find out the things that were meaningful to them, and that will a lot of times help you identify the love language, the way that they felt when they received that gift. Will be a roadmap to help you realize that would probably be a good way to go. Fourth love language is acts of service. In Galatians 5:13 it says this: serve one another in love. Acts of service means doing things that you know your partner would like for you to do. You seek to please them by doing the things, by spending the time, the effort, and the energy that you know will be meaningful to them. Now, I hope your mom doesn't tune into the live stream. My mother-in-law, if we were over at her house and there was something that she needed done around the house, we could offer to pay someone to do it. That would be great. I mean, and a lot of times I would gladly pay the money to have someone do it. But I know that this is one of her love languages, acts of service. So even if I'm not great at whatever it is that needs to be done, I'll do it, not because I want to or because that is a deep-seated desire in my heart to win the approval of my mother-in-law or nothing like that, but because that is something that's meaningful to her. I can express love in a way that really resonates with her by doing that. And whether it's, trimming a bush or just making a work project weekend when we go down, sometimes expressing love through acts of services is one of the ways that you can make a very tangible attempt to let someone know that you are expressing love to them. So here's a couple of principles to keep in mind. Requests for service, they cannot be demands. If there's something that you need done that you want your spouse to do, going back to the whole ultimatum conversation, you need to do this or else, you're probably not going to get it done. Nobody wants to have someone twist their arm into doing something. But if you let it be known, here's a couple of principles to keep in mind. First of all, remember that before you were married, you were dating, and everybody was doing these different things because they were in love. Now, once the love wears off, the honeymoon's over, then sometimes people start thinking, well, I don't feel like doing that. They start realizing that the way that they felt when they were in love and obsession does not always have the clout to carry them through to do the things that they do not feel like doing later on. When someone reverts to how they operated before they fell in love, sometimes you might want to take a look at the way that you are communicating what you would like to be done, because if you're making ultimatums rather than requests, then that might be the reason that things are causing conflict. Second, love is a choice. Love cannot be coerced out of another person. Each one of us has to decide daily that we're going to love or not love our partner. If you choose to love them, express the love in a way that is meaningful to them. Express the love in a way that resonates, that connects with them. And if you do that, if you express love in a way that your partner or your child needs, it will be effective, and you want to be effective emotionally. And third, this one's you got to kind of handle with kid gloves and tread lightly. If your partner is criticizing something in your life, if your children are criticizing something in your life, sometimes that provides you with a clue to what you may or may not be doing right when it comes to communicating and expressing love. I'll give you an example. I know couples that have spent a lot of time together, but they feel like they haven't. I mean, they literally could be with each other 10 hours a day, but they feel so alone. They feel like they've never had a meaningful conversation because neither one of them is doing anything that matters to the other person. They're only doing the things that matter to themselves. And when you operate in a relationship, whether it's with your spouse or whether it's with your children or your friends, if you're only doing things that are meaningful to you, then it's not sustainable. You want to get your relationship to a point where the other person, regardless of the relationship, knows that you are willing and able to do things to grow that relationship. Let's take it from a coworker point of view or a student peer point of view. So let's say that you have a coworker. You know that you are going to need off next Thursday. Maybe it's a conversation. Hey, listen, you know what? I know that you said, Fred, that you had to that your kids got a game this Friday. Why don't I take that for you? Hey, man, Fred, I know that was a great experience whenever you got to go to your kid's game. I would like to do the same thing next Thursday. Could I trade with you? But now there are some people that in a relationship, they're going to take, and never give. And that kind of ends up resolving itself. But a lot of times you have to sow the seeds that you want in the relationship, whether it's with the person that you're married to, whether it's the person that you're parenting, the person you're working with, the person that you're friends with. So you have to overcome your stereotypes. You have to make sure that you don't expect someone to let you down. Whenever you're trying to move the relationship in the direction that you want it to go, don't expect failure. Don't expect that person to blow it every time that you need something from them. Express love and look to receive love. So let me give you some tips on this one, and then we'll move on and we'll wrap this up. Make a list of 3 or 4 things that you would like for your partner to do. If you're someone that's trying to get the acts of service love language covered. So whenever you make this list, have your partner make a list as well. Exchanges. This works not just for the person that you're married to, but with kids. If you're trying to get your kids to do their chores, if there's something that your kids are trying to get you to do, maybe y'all both make lists and exchange the lists. Now, there are some items on the list that are going to be high commitment levels and some things that are going to be low commitment levels. But sometimes when you realize what the other person is looking for, it helps you to hit the mark. I know that in our family, we go to each other's stuff. Lord knows that as your kids get older, you can get worn out by stuff. I went to 18 soccer games, 2 football games, a karate practice, and a gaming tournament, and I get that. That is an act of service. You are making an intentional choice to load up at 4 o'clock in the morning and drive halfway across the state for something that honestly you probably might not care so much about. But whenever you're doing that, when you're expressing that love, there is no substitute, there is no replacement for how you make the other person feel when you're willing to set aside the way that you feel to pursue something that's meaningful to them. 5th love language is physical touch. So, there is a lot that could be said about this, but physical touch is a fundamental expression of love. and it meets a biological need. I want to encourage you, if this is something that you want to know more about, you probably want to pick up the 5 love languages. It would be very easy for this sermon right here to go to PG. So I'm going to focus on some non-sexual aspects of touch, though, because everybody needs to be embraced. I came from a family that did not hug. I mean, we do not hug. But whenever I got married, my wife's family, they hug each other 10 times a day, dude. It was ridiculous. I was thinking, these are the most huggy people I've ever met in my entire life, until I met Shad Clark. And Shad Clark, Shad, if you're tuned in, love you, brother. Shad Clark helped me to increase the hugginess comfort level in my life. But sometimes expressing that love through physical touch is an awesome and incredible thing. Now, guys, keeping this, still G-rated, sometimes your spouse needs to know that touch does not always lead to something. That means sometimes you might just need to hold your wife's hand. And this is because I came from an absolutely non-huggy, non-expressing emotion. There are times that I have to mentally make a note, hold my wife's hand, touch her foot whenever you're watching a show. And that might not be something that, resonates with you. You might not like to hold people's feet, but if that's something that's meaningful, that touch, that physical expression is one of those things that will be very meaningful. So keep in mind, in times of crisis, particularly if there is some sort of an unexpected event that has caused great sadness or distress, that is an important time to express love through physical touch. Holding people, embracing people, holding hands, reassuring them. That's a powerful time to minister to that person through physical touch. So let's break this down in a minute and a half, just run through some things that'll be meaningful. Let's talk about words of affirmation. That might be, let me express myself without agreeing or punishing. That might mean letting me know about your day. Tell me about a time that you felt proud, and tell me how you feel. Tell me your deepest thoughts about things. Tell me that you like the way that I look. Talk directly to me about your feelings. Don't clam up. Compliment me in front of other people. That might mean telling me that I'm doing a good job at something that I'm not spectacular at. That might mean telling me something that you appreciate about me. That might mean telling me that you're sorry. That might mean picturing something positive about our future together. Let's talk about quality time. What does that mean? That might mean coming home for dinner. That might be planning a time alone with that person. That might mean focusing on what they're saying rather than being distracted by all the other things that are going on at work. That might mean reading a relationship book together with your spouse. That sometimes might not be the most exciting thing that you want to do, but sometimes doing that will move your relationship in the direction that you want it to go. Sometimes that means being protective of your time together with that other person. So let's talk about giving and receiving gifts. Maybe that means bringing me flowers or a small surprise gift. Maybe that means buying your favorite magazine. Maybe it means buying a piece of jewelry. Maybe it means buying me a scope for my AR-15. Maybe, let's talk about nurturing touch. Maybe it means spending more time being affectionate. Maybe it means showing me that you want to be with me by simply holding my hand. So friends, these are just 5 of the love languages.
For more information, please visit our website at fellowshipkansas.com or call 785-243-3449.